Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to July's Cabinet meeting, just 2 days away now from hosting the Commonwealth Games. I think as you walk around the city centre, you can see not only all of the city dressing that's making the city look wonderful at the moment, but the growing number of people from around the world walking around with accreditation who are here, of course, to compete in the Birmingham 2022 Commonwealth Games, and there's increasing excitement amongst the people of this city as well, which is palpable as you walk around the city centre. And I was out at the stadium on Sunday evening looking at transport arrangements for ingress and egress from the stadium for the opening ceremony, and those going into the rehearsal were clearly excited about what the city is about to stage. So, I would say to all of you, do make most of this opportunity, do come into the city centre and be part of this, because there's going to be a wonderful atmosphere in this city over the next 2 weeks. Okay, turning to today's agenda, item 1 is the notice of recording to advise everyone that they can take photographs or record this meeting if they wish to do so. The council itself will webcast this meeting for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's YouTube site. Item 2 is apologies, and I've received apologies from Councillor Ewan Mackey and from Councillor Karen McCarthy. Are the notes? You could note those 2 apologies, please. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Does anybody wish to declare an interest in respect to today's agenda? No. Item 4 then, exempt information and possible exclusion of the press and public. We have exempt appendices in respect of items 12, 14 and 16. Anybody wish to raise anything on those exempt appendices? No. In which case we will proceed as in the order set out on the agenda. So item 5 then, financial monitoring report, quarter 1 up to the 30th of June this year. Yvonne.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I'm very excited as well about the games, and I could hear from my friend's house the rehearsals on Sunday as well. Very loud, very exciting, and I look forward to participating, even though I'm not a sports person, but I'm extremely excited. So this is the first financial monitoring report of the new financial year. At this time, we're anticipating a balanced position by the end of the year. The council faces a number of challenges. Can you hear me out there? Am I speaking loudly enough? Thank you. Because I'm conscious of always being on the other side, you see, and not being able to hear. So the council faces a number of challenges this year, including the ongoing impact of Brexit, the impact from the war in the Ukraine, energy costs, and the cost of living crisis affecting many of our citizens. However, the council is in a robust position with strong financial processes in place. Reserves are healthy and within recommended limits. Unlike many councils, we undertake a rolling review of our budget all year rather than a one-off annual process. So we are constantly looking at the pressures we are facing now or in the future, giving us time to manage impacts. The Director of Council Management will be presenting a medium-term financial plan update report to Cabinet in October, providing an update on the financial pressures the council is facing and the mitigating actions being taken. In this report, a number of risks to improve to the revenue budget are identified by directors, including in particular children and families, which has risks relating to special education needs assessment and review service, home to school, transport and Birmingham Children's Trust, and city operations has potential pressures from parking income shortfall, leisure management fees shortfall, and inflationary pressures on electricity and fuel. And there are also corporate risks identified, including the potential that the pay award, which could be above budget, set aside of 2.5%, and there are general inflationary pressures as well. There are, however, a number of opportunities to mitigate these costs, which is using a policy contingency budget set aside for electricity pressures, some service underspends relating to staffing, the ongoing expenditure controls, opportunities for increasing income such as digital mail and bringing enforcement in-house. Capital spend in 2022-23 has budgeted at 531.7 million. Cabinet is asked to approve increase in budget of 162.7 million from slippage in 2021-22. This report also contains Treasury Management and Investment Portfolio reports in Appendix A, Annex 2 and 3. Leader, I ask the Cabinet to approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, which includes the approval of writing off debt for 25,000 as set out in paragraph 4.11. Any questions or comments? Robert.
Thank you. And Yvonne, thank you for that introduction there. Something you didn't touch on though really was about the Oracle rollout. Now obviously there is some information in this report, and it's obviously not the system itself Oracle's used perfectly successfully across the country and the world. It looks like the issues here have been the way that the councils manage that rollout. So for instance, the issue of cost centres in financial management not having been put on the system in advance, not being put on the system in advance. We know there's been issues with payments both going out and obviously the council trying to bring payments in. That has caused issues for businesses and third sector organisations in the city. So where are we in terms of getting that fixed so we don't have this continuing situations where particularly SMEs in the city are having to dip into, in some cases, in some of the casework I've sent to the council, their own personal savings because of the cash flow issues caused by the council not paying money it owes on time because of issues in that system. Also, when you look further into report 14.29, it picks up, there's an issue about now having to pay out overtime to try and fix some of these issues. So again, where was that in terms of the original plan? The claim is that sort of standard practice, but presumably we originally would have had a budget code set out for doing this stuff in advance, and now we have to have a new budget line to pay for overtime. So what assessment's been done about where that should have come, some of this stuff, in terms of being done in advance? Turning on to other items in the report, we were told back in February that the 33 million black hole in the budget would have a report coming to the July Cabinet to explain how that would be filled. Obviously, that's not on this agenda today. So can the Cabinet member explain what savings are going to be put in place to actually deliver on that commitment to fill the 33 million shortfall that was given in February? And then in 14.3.4, it talks about potential shortfall on the capitalisation of transformation costs in 20 million. So can Cabinet member give more detail about what's being done to fill that shortfall and also what caused that shortfall? So is it an issue of the assets we're disposing of haven't been reaching sufficient demand, or haven't been getting enough money in, or is it actually another reason? The Cabinet member has some detail on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before you respond to that, I just want to pick up the issue of Oracle, because clearly City Council is a very large organisation. The transferring of its financial management system onto a new platform was always going to be a vast undertaking, and we might reasonably have expected that there would be some teething problems with that. Having said that, I do agree with Councillor Orban's comments in respect of the payments of contractors by the City Council, the late payment that's been caused by teething problems with Oracle. So I'm going to ask the Strategic Director for Council Management to just comment on what those issues have been and what we are doing to fix them.
Absolutely. So, as you know, the system went live at the beginning of April, and Council, we had to chat about this if there are no standards that was difficult. And we went straight into 3 months of hypercare, which is where you absolutely, have a dedicated team that does nothing but go through any teething problems or anything else. So, and we're now in early life support system, 3 months to September. In terms of the budget, which I know we discussed yesterday, the opportunity was taken. So the budgets were ready to be loaded, absolutely go live. The opportunity was taken to do actually a complete review of cost centres and budget hierarchies and everything to improve our financial management reporting, but also to improve our overall management of finances across the organisation. The better aligned we can get those, then the better aligned the more visibility and transparency we can give to members. But also the ownership of cost centres is absolutely paramount in any Oracle SAP system, ERP system, because that's where you derive all your authorisations, the payments, all your authorisations for ordering and invoicing. So it's really important we did that. So we took an extra opportunity to do some improvement work rather than just put it on as it was and go live. So that's, as you know, caused delays. All the budgets due to be uploaded by the end of July this month. So that comes that one. On the accounts payable and accounts receivable and payroll we're running at, there are minimum errors on payroll. That's a lesser concern to us, and we're picking those up as we go along. For us, the key is the accounts payable and the accounts receivable. So accounts payable, as you say, 96% of our economy is SME, so it's really important. Cash flow is really important. So in total, we're running about a week behind our 30-day payment terms. However, there are differentials there. So as we said yesterday, and I'd say this to any member, if you're aware of any that are particularly pertinent and need and have had further delays than that, let us know. In that case, in your casework, let us know straight away and we can pick those up. But the overall, that's where we're at. The focus on accounts receivable, as you know, direct debits went live and it had been live now for 3 or 4 weeks, and we are working our way through any backlog. And I would say this to all cabinet members: whenever you change from one big system to another, you always have to pause the system for at least a month while you do that, because otherwise you haven't got a straight line of what you're moving from one system to another. You can't do the reconciliations and everything you need to do for completeness and accuracy. So that month, clearly, you would want us to catch up on as quickly as we can. So that's our main thrust at the moment, is doing that catch-up work. So we have a meeting later on this afternoon on our report to relook at all of the stats across all of those, and of course we can share that with members as they wish.
Thank you very much. We do have to get this fixed as quickly as we can. The other issue, Rob, that you raised about the £33 million gap in future years of the council's medium-term financial plan. That gap was transparently reported when we agreed the budget back in February this year. Some further work has been undertaken on how we're going to close that off. So as you correctly pointed out, there's not a report on today's agenda, but there will be a report coming forward now in October. The other issue, Yvonne, if you can pick that up.
14.3, that there is the council not being able to fully meet the target. This is, Rebecca, could you respond to that, please?
Yeah, of course I will. So, and I know we had a quick chat about this yesterday as well, didn't we? So in any one year, we will capitalise spend where it is rightly on transformation. And it's something that the external auditors would always review anyway, and we make sure we're completely open and transparent on it. So the risk around here is having sufficient spend on transformation to be able to meet that 20 million. If it's less, it's less. The risk is less around raising those capital receipts. It's more around, is there actually £20 million worth of spend on transformation that we're able to capitalise, rightly able to capitalise. This is a key issue that's raised with councils across the country. It's something that needs to be done absolutely in an absolute black and white fashion. We will only capitalise when it's absolutely transformation leading to savings.
And I think what will be useful for council to hear about is the mitigations in place to help those who are experiencing difficulties as well. So I know that we've put in place things for people who are not getting their pay on time, if they're not getting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's fast track. There's also fast track across all accounts payable for where we find SMEs that are in having cash flow. We've got all the systems there, and as you say, on payroll too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, in which case can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6? Is that correct?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 6 then is the draft corporate plan. We are asked as Cabinet to consider the draft corporate plan, and subject to any comments that are made this morning, recommend the draft to full council for approval, and note that a delivery and performance plan will be developed. The plan, of course, sets out the 6 strategic outcomes that City Council is aiming for, and the 28 priority aims that will help achieve those outcomes. The draft plan provides a framework for the organisation of business and financial planning, and it provides a summary of the strategic context the council is operating in, the strategic priorities of the council, and how the council will continue to transform and drive improvements in services. Priorities reflect the political priorities of the current administration, and tackling inequalities is at the heart of the plan. Our intention is to make Birmingham a city where all citizens sharing the creation and benefits of sustainable economic growth and live longer, healthier and happier lives. And we'll work with our partners to build a bolder, brighter Birmingham. The plan reiterates a commitment to continue to drive improvement and modernisation across our organisation so that we can deliver our priorities in the most effective, efficient and productive way. The plan will be reviewed annually and updated to reflect changes in strategic context and political priorities. Happy to take any comments or observations that anyone has. Robert, you first.
Thank you. I appreciate this is going to full council, so I shan't go into great depth in it because obviously I'll just be repeating what will end up getting discussed at full council. But it does mention the game, so it is a chance just to echo Ian's comments at the beginning about obviously the opportunity that everyone's got in the city over the next couple of weeks. And I think we'd all agree around this table that the Brummies themselves and the city as a whole is the friendliest place in the world. And I'm sure Brummies in the city will want to make sure that all our visitors Birmingham over the next couple of weeks get to see that friendly reception that we all know and love in our city. And it's particularly important because it won't just be athletes around the city, there will also be people who have money to invest around the city, and we want to make sure that they're seeing the absolute best of Birmingham, so that some of that investment might come into the city following the games. So I do urge everyone to enjoy it, but also make sure we make all the visitors to the city really welcome.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure Birmingham will welcome the world, as we've said, for a long time. Delivering the games is not easy. Like all we know it on the ground, but I'm sure Birmingham will welcome the visitors. In terms of this corporate plan, the questions I have, the challenge for you, is that it's got 20 priorities. You mentioned it sets out the administration's priorities. You say, but the issue is that actually it's got 20 priorities in it, and each of those priorities has got a lot of detail in them. In other words, pretty well anything that anybody would want to do is contained within a priority. And I think the problem you're going to have at the moment with this plan is that anybody can do anything that they want to do, citing at least one priority that supports what they want to do. The second problem with that, when you have so many priorities, is how you reconcile when there's a clash of priorities. For instance, climate change is an important priority, but often other things that people want to do may clash with a climate change objective. Now, a report may come in that may cite priorities 1, 2, 3, and not mention a climate change one, unless it's challenged. So how will the administration reconcile conflicts between priorities? Is the numbering 1 to 20 of priorities, does that reflect the order of the priorities within the priorities? I don't think it does, but I think that you're going to have to think of that as an administration. What the priorities are within that. To some extent, you set it out already. You mentioned tackling inequality and issues such as that. So we've got that with yourself as leader, but I'm not sure the document fully reflects that. And I think if the document is being used by particularly people trying to prepare proposals to try and reflect the administration's priorities, they may struggle to be sure what it is they need to do.
Thank you. Any other comments? I think just to pick up your point there, John, where there is competition between priorities within the plan, that will obviously have to be resolved as we bring forward reports that will be agreed by the full council or at cabinet. There will be a delivery plan that's produced in November, I think it is, that will set out how we tend to deliver against those priorities, monitor our progress through milestones that we'll set out in that plan. So I don't think we're in a situation where there's going to be any confusion here. I think we are clear. We were clear when we went to the electorate back in May, having set out the priorities in our manifesto. They've been translated into this particular plan, and we will monitor our progress as a Labour Party Council against the manifesto which we stood and won the last set of elections. So I don't think we're going to have a problem sifting out where the priorities are, the changes that we want to make in this city. As I said earlier, we want to make sure that Birmingham is a city where the citizens share in the creation of benefits of sustainable economic growth and live longer, healthier and happier lives. And just to put that into context, we know that more than 1 in 9 working age people in the city have no qualifications. So in order to ensure that all of our communities can have a stake in the future of the city, we know that when we create jobs, we have to upskill significant numbers of our citizens in order that they can access those jobs. And we also know that almost 4 in 10 children growing up in this city are growing up in relative poverty. And that is something that the City Council alone cannot resolve. We will have to work with our partners, we will have to work with the private sector to tackle ingrained issues such as that. We're also aware of the inequalities that were laid bare by the pandemic. Those inequalities were hidden in plain sight for many years, and we've got to do something to get on and tackle those as well. So I think as an administration, we're quite clear in the direction of travel that we have to go, and we're quite clear on the outcomes that we want to see for the people of this city.
If I could as well, Lisa, and when we met Councillor Hunt, hopefully you were reassured that this also informs a very clear performance management framework as well. So there will be continuous assessment of our delivery against the priorities that we've identified in the plan. And each department, each directorate will have their own delivery plan, which will be developed through and guided by the corporate plan. So any hint of, competing priorities or priorities working against each other will be weeded out at a very early stage.
Thank you very much. This will be going on to full council, so no doubt we can pick up this debate at that meeting. But in the meantime, then, can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 3 to 2, 3?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 7 is the Selly Park Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. This report seeks approval for the adoption of the Selly Park Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, the adoption of the new boundary and a new Article 4 direction. The Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, the local community, were instrumental in researching, collating and producing the contents of the document in line with the standard format of the City Council's other Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan documents. The community sought to address the specific challenges of managing the conservation area going forwards on behalf of all members of that community. Public consultation was carried out on the draft plan, the proposed boundary amendments and the new Article 4 direction. That ran for an 8-week period between August of 2021 and October of 2021. All residents in the area were notified of the consultation by letter, and the consultation was advertised in the local press and on the City Council website. There was also a public meeting. It was very well attended and supported by the local ward councillors. I do want to draw particular attention to paragraph 5.4 because Historic England gave particular recognition to the work of the local community throughout this process, and they commented particularly on the Selly Park Property Owners Association, saying that they thoroughly applauded both as regards the production of the appraisal and in relation to assisting in the positive management of the conservation area going forward. So I think that is very much to the credit of the Selly Park Property Owners Association. Public consultation responses are set out in Appendix 4, but overwhelmingly there was support for the appraisal document. There was also positive support for the boundary amendments, and no objections were raised to the proposed new Article 4 direction to cover Bournemouth Road. So I think this is good news for all those who worked quite hard to get this recognition for so far. That's brilliant.
Thank you. It happens to be my ward. I just want to echo the thanks to the SPOA, the Local Residents Association. It is a really unique conservation area with a very eclectic mix of architectural styles and eras. And SPOA have been absolutely tireless in defending the covenant on the land and making sure that those buildings are for future generations in their style. I've never quite seen community work like it. So thank you to SPOA. Thank you to the officers that worked with them.
Thank you. Any other comments, Robert?
Yeah, thank you. Perfectly happy to support it, but what I think it does show is though, just how in demand, if you like, conservation areas are from local residents to be able to see heritage protected. And what I hope this will see, this when you think of the following item as well, is perhaps a change in the way the department operates, because currently the department is very anti any new conservation areas being put in place in the city, and certainly when we've looked at in Erdington trying to get one in the Victorian area around the High Street, officers just are not willing to engage at any substantive level to help the community work and put plans together. So I hope what we're seeing here is a change in attitude in the department, and actually we're now going to see some more serious effort to make sure we do protect some of these amazing buildings that we've got in the city.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, I'll just pick that up because I don't believe there is reluctance on behalf of officers to engage on this agenda. What I think the issue is that in order to designate an area as a conservation area, a certain standard has to be met, and there is clearly a difference of opinion in some parts of the city between the local community and professional officers as to how and if that standard is met, and that's something of a communication issue, I think, and we maybe have to do more to inform residents of the standards that have to be met in order to qualify for a conservation area. But I don't think there is a problem here or a lack of engagement here by officers of the council. So with that, can we agree then recommendation 2.1? Thank you. And we'll move on to item 8, which is very, very similar report. In this case, this is Agnes Mosley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. As with the last one, this report seeks approval for the adoption of Agnes Mosley Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan, the adoption of a new boundary and a new Article 4 direction. Similar to the previous report, the local community have been instrumental in researching, collating and producing the content of the document in line with the standard format of the city's other conservation area appraisal and management plan documents. There was a consultation that ran between April 2021 and June 2021. All residents were notified by the consultation by letter, and the consultation was advertised in the local press and on the City Council's website. There's also a public meeting in this instance. In total, there were 50 written responses to that public consultation, and the responses are set out in Appendix 4. Overall, there was support for the appraisal document, support for the proposed boundary amendment, and no objection to the proposed new Article 4 direction. So again, I'll happily take questions. John?
If I may, a message from Councillor as he knows that the document says that she was consulted following an election, doesn't actually give her a response. And she wishes to be recorded. She's very, very supportive of this, and to thank all the residents for all the work they've put in helping to develop this.
Thank you for that. We will note her support for this. Robert?
Thank you. Yeah, it's really one of the really top quality examples of some housing we've had in the city over the years. And so very supportive of it. And I think it's absolutely imperative that this conservation plan is both strengthened and protected, because obviously there has been quite an erosion of the neighbouring areas around that have some similar examples of property but which have been lost. So it's really good to see this coming forward.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the Article 4 direction will ensure that what you've just said is protected in the future. So can we agree recommendation 2.1? Agree. Thank you. Moving on into item 9. Birmingham Three Cities Whole House Retrofit Pilot. Sharon?
Thank you. So yeah, just to start off, I just want to say that housing has to play its part when it comes to the green agenda, particularly the amount of properties that we've got across the city, including council properties, but also what we're seeing at the moment in terms of the amount of people that are living with fuel poverty at the moment, and that's estimated 92,000, nearly 100,000 households are with fuel poverty at the moment. So I'm really excited about this project because it's the first for Birmingham in terms of innovation and the way we're doing it differently. Being clear, not at least clear, that when it comes to the green agenda, our contributions must be more than just simply looking at it from a house building perspective. We've got to look at our own properties and start from the point where we're looking at some of our properties that need more investment than others. And I think this is a key project for that. So we are talking about 300 properties, and it is a pilot scheme. This pilot represents a bold, we are being bold in learning, and innovative opportunity to advance local, regional, and national ambitions to reduce carbon emissions and deliver future-proofed retrofit for Birmingham City Council's worst properties. And this will be taking place in the east of the city, which fits in with the three city strategy, but also in terms of the levelling up. And that will be happening in the Hodge Hill part of the city in terms of the east. Other than that, I just want to say, like I said, that this is a pilot that's taking place, or we're hoping to take place given Cabinet approval today. And this will be the biggest pilot of its kind across the country, which is really, really exciting. Others, like Nottingham, have done pilots before, but they've been on a much smaller scale and nowhere near as really ambitious and as big as Birmingham. So we really are leading in the space in terms of the sector. But other than the credentials around that, I think the key thing is the impact this is going to have on those local people that are living within these properties, particularly as we see at a time when we're in an energy crisis, bills are going up. This will make a substantial difference to those people. And I know, having spoken to the ward councillors and the MP, they are supportive of this project for those very reasons. So Leader will be asking that the Cabinet support this ambitious proposal for Birmingham that is a pilot, and we'd like to think that later on, when we get this done successfully, we can look at rolling it out further in terms of the rest of the city. But we do have to be very mindful that with the cost of retrofitting the entirety of the council's stock, that would be as much as about £3.6 billion over about 30 years of investment into our stock. But this is a really good starting point. We're really excited, so thank you very much and see the Cabinet's approval.
Thank you, Sharon. Just to underline what you said about this being the biggest pilot in the country, you and I visited another pilot in Birmingham, the Housing Association was running. I think that was less than 20 properties. 12 properties, so it does put this 300 property pilot into context. I think. In the case of that scheme, of course, they have got Birmingham City University analysing all the data that's coming out of those properties. And I do think we do need to put some academic rigour behind this pilot as well, in order that we are usefully using the data that we will gain from running this pilot. And of course, as you've said, the retrofitting of properties across, or social properties across Birmingham, would be a long-term project, and of course technology will change over that period of time, and it would be interesting to see where this goes into in the future in terms of technology and what can be done to help people heat and provide hot water to their homes in a more efficient way, a way that costs less money hopefully in the future.
Just give you some comfort that we are tracking data, we will be tracking data on this project.
Good. John.
Thank you. This is certainly a very, very welcome project, and I wish it well. The question I have is, I think it's using air source heat pumps, and whether there's been any investigation using ground source heat pumps, which are quite capital intensive, I believe, and therefore are best applied to quite large buildings, but the returns are much more significant than the air source heat pumps, and should certainly be looked at for blocks of flats and larger buildings, and would deliver a tenant even better returns in terms of energy savings.
Robert.
Thank you. A couple of things. I guess it's less of an issue for pilot, more of an issue to consider when things get rolled out further. I'm assuming you would have looked at this for pilot, but obviously we need to just be mindful around looking at properties and our lifespan of those properties, and are they actually properties which would be better off rebuilding, as we've done in some states in the past. So that's just something to consider. What we don't want to see is the council spend, you've talked about a huge sum of money only to then demolish those buildings a few years later. And the other aspect of it is obviously it's not just about heating, it's also about cooling. So is that forming part of this retrofit work, about the ability to cool the house and therefore not have to have people running electric fans, etc. in the summer, and particularly mindful as we're going to say anything hotter summers. that needs to be a bigger part of the work as well. So we consider that as part of the retrofit program.
Thank you, Magic.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very supportive of this report. I'd like to thank the officers and Sharon for the extensive work in putting this together. As you're probably aware, Joseph Cranfield Foundation last year, September, a presidential report which stated that Birmingham, our constituency, has the highest level of fuel poverty in the country. So clearly, an investment of £28 million to tackle fuel poverty for households in my ward, the claim interest bump and health budget is very much welcome. Not only will this reduce fuel bills, it will also bring about much needed green efficiencies, tackle the carbon emissions and create jobs, which I do hope that we are targeting local people and training local people to do those jobs, because going forward there is going to be a lot of investment around green efficiencies, and central government is hoping that cross-party we can work together to bring in that investment to the city as well. Now, like Sharon, I agree this is a catalyst for change in the city, and hopeful if the pilot is successful that we will be able to roll this out for the part of the city. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
Okay, so I'll go John's question first. Yes, it is air source, and I'm quite interested in the underground
Ground source.
ground source. That's it, ground source. And actually went to look at another scheme in Tide Cross, actually, where they are looking at that at the moment, and they're using that. On this particular scheme, ground source is not suitable for this particular pilot, and that's why we've not done that way, but it's not really hazardous, it's not suitable for the particular pilot. And these properties are very much in demand, so, you know, we're hoping, well, we are taking into consideration when it comes to the lifespan of properties, and that is something that we're looking at across the whole piece, about whether actually, in some instances, would be better to sort of go through regeneration and build new properties because the lifespan is going to be too expensive actually to go through the retrofit. So those things, Julie and Paul Kitson are actually looking at through their departments. In terms of the insulation, this was a question that I asked. I don't think we want to worry about getting into that sort of greenhouse effect where it's really hot in the summer. But I've been told that the improved insulation keeps the houses cooler in the summer and warm in the winter, so we don't have that problem with reversal. So all in all, it's really exciting, and just to give Magic some comfort, yes, we will be looking at local jobs and local supply chains and materials too, because we really need to think about, you know, the economic growth of our city and our people that we represent here.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Can we agree on the recommendations 2.1 through to 2.7? Agree? Thank you. Item 10 is the Walsall Heath Community Governance Review. This report presents the provisional conclusions of the Community Governance Review on the proposal for the creation of a new neighbourhood council in the Walsall Heath area of the city. The report itself asks us to accept the recommendation that the process should move to the next stage, which will be further engagement with the community and consultative ballot, and that we approve the holding of such a ballot involving all electors in the area covered by the proposed neighbourhood council. There will be a further report to Cabinet following that ballot, so that the results can be considered. The Community Governance Review for Walsall Heath is attached as Appendix 1, and that report sets out the detail of the consultation undertaken as part of the review and the feedback that was received. Do we have any comments on this, John?
Thank you. I think it's a very welcome step forward. I think it's going to be challenging to set up parish councils in some parts of the city. Its work can be very effective for communities and very beneficial. In terms of what we're seeing here from Walsall Heath, I think the number of responses is quite low at this point. And because you set quite a high threshold for the consultative ballot, and in terms of that going through. I wonder whether more thought needs to be given to how the parish council will capture the diversity of the community. The point we've made repeatedly is that the best way to run the parish council is using a single transferable vote where you can allow a diversity of people being elected to them. I think there's 2 wards proposed for Walsall Heath here, which again possibly should be kept under review, because another solution in terms of diversity is can come from warding and having possibly quite small wards for a parish council, just to ensure that the whole parish council isn't elected as a single block. And there is scope for diversity within the community being granted here.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, Robert?
Yeah, thank you. I think within the two ward proposal level, because obviously there'll be multi-member wards that will allow reasonable scope for diversity of opinion. I mean, you can see that in the other town councils we've got that it has done relatively so. I wanted to pick up just about the boundaries actually, because obviously it picks up a reasonable chunk of the Borstal Heath East and Spark Brook ward, and then obviously takes in the majority of the Borstal Heath West ward, but it leaves a very tiny bit of the Borstal Heath West ward out of the parish council at the Benmore estate. And it runs the risk, I would have thought, if that's excluded, of effectively creating within that ward, because it's such a tiny part of that single member ward that's then excluded from it, a sort of second class citizen issue where the ward member of that ward is going to end up being disproportionately involved with the parish council issue, but then to the neglect of Benmore estate. So I was wondering what logic had been put in place as to why that was being excluded, when obviously it normally would make sense just to include it given the ward boundaries. So could that be picked up? And then, yeah, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no other comments. I'll pick those. I'm starting with the comment you just made there. Right. This proposal has come, of course, from the local community, but I take your point about that area that's not currently included. We will pick that up through the further engagement that we conduct out with the community and see what their thoughts are. And John, you are correct that the numbers engaged thus far are low. That is why we're now going out for further engagement. On the question of the threshold, though, I think when we had the cabinet report here that set the threshold for these ballots, there was some concern that we had to have a threshold that demonstrated there was support across the community for a parish or town council, precisely because parish and town councils do raise tax through town council tax supplements. And so the view that was taken was in order to assure ourselves that there was support for that proposal, we should set the threshold reasonably high, and that's what's happened. So if there are no further comments, then this will go for further community engagement and a consultative ballot with a report coming back to Cabinet in due course. So can we agree then? The recommendation set out within the report in paragraph 2.1.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 11 then, refugee resettlement schemes, years 2 to 5 contracts. John.
Thanks, Ian. As you probably all noticed, it's been an incredibly busy and challenging period in terms of refugees and migration work in the council. We've got a very small but very dedicated team who've been taking that work forward, and most of their time and energy over the last year has been putting their efforts into some urgent time critical stuff, firstly the response to Afghanistan, and then more recently supporting those with the horrors of what's unfolding in Ukraine. So firstly, just to put on record, thanks to that team for the work that they're doing. But it's also meant that some other work is not proceeding according to our original plans, and that includes the plan we originally set out for the re-procurement of the refugee settlement contracts. So what this report proposes to do is two things in response to that situation. Firstly, we've got to ensure that the services and support for often quite vulnerable refugees remain in place and aren't interrupted as we develop the longer-term re-procurement strategy. So we're proposing to extend the existing contracts as set out in paragraph 3.4 up to March of next year. And then secondly, to put in place a longer-term strategy by asking Cabinet to give approval to the work we're doing to develop a framework agreement for future refugee support and integration commissioning. That's important because the nature of some of the challenges that we're now facing has changed. Twice over the last year, we've had to respond to very rapidly escalating crises, obviously first in Afghanistan and then Ukraine. And both of those have also required us to respond at quite short notice to government schemes that have been stood up at some speed. So what we need is a more flexible and agile system to procure that's better placed than our existing arrangements to respond to the crises and the requests we get from government. So that framework will streamline our procurement process and enable us to draw in services from a pool of experienced service providers. So the plan is that we consult the market later in the summer with a view to inviting providers to tender to join the framework. We want that to be in place by February, and then we'll be able to call off for the delivery of services from that framework from April of next year. And we've also taken steps to strengthen the staffing competence of the team to ensure we've got skills, capacity in place to commission services to respond to these very serious situations and ensure that we continue to extend that warm-handed welcome as a city of sanctuary.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, very much echo John's comments there about the staff involvement. It's very important work, and yeah, it's important to particularly with the rapid needed response over the Ukraine issue and trying to have this be as quick as possible. So it's absolutely thanks. Obviously, in terms of the contracts themselves, there has in the past been there are a number of connections between council's officers and MPs in the city with some of these organisations. So just looking for an assurance that, given we don't necessarily have those declarations of interest, that we can get an assurance that none of the councillors, MPs, officers who are connected to these organisations have been involved in the process of awarding these contracts.
Well, I don't know who those people would be, in fact, Robert, but I'll come back to you now. I'm assuming we will have gone through the usual checks on this, and if we had engaged any of those individuals, it wouldn't be for them to declare their interest if that's what they have.
Absolutely.
Okay, if there's no further comment, then can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 3, 2, 5? Item 12, contract extension to civil parking enforcement services. Liz.
Thanks very much, Leader. And just before I introduce the report, I want to say last night when I was preparing myself for the 2 reports that I'm presenting today, I had Radio 3 on, listening to the CBSO at the proms. In fact, it was an absolutely fantastic concert. My favourite was the Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony, amazing romantic piece. And it was just, a real moment of pride to hear the CBSO with their new conductor, Kazuki and Mardan. We should never underestimate what a brilliant ambassadors for CBSOs for the city. So I'm exploiting my position here, but I just want to say it was just an amazing concert. I've got the tunes turning around in my head. And it did light up my brain to prepare myself to talk about the extension of the civil parking contracts that we need to do now. So this report is requesting an approval to extend our current contract for civil parking enforcement for 12 months from the 1st of February 2023. The estimated total value is £3 million based on current costs. And we're also seeking approval to delegate the approval of the tender strategy and subsequent contract award to myself as Cabinet Member for Transport and to Yvonne as Cabinet Member for Finance. Delegation jointly with the Director of City Operations and the Assistant Director of Procurement. One of the reasons why we need this sort of extra 12 months is to prepare the council to take over moving traffic enforcement powers and get ready for that. And I think the judgment is that the performance of MSL as the contractor has been satisfactory. I know there are all sorts of feedback about enforcement across the city, which I have dealt with in previous years as the chair of scrutiny. But I think in general, we deem the performance to be satisfactory, and we're asking for this extension, and so that we have time to prepare for the new tender process. The recommendations are set out in the report in paragraphs 2.1 to 2.4, so I'd like to present this for approval today.
Thank you very much, Liz. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. And this is one of the rare examples when I can understand the logic of why you're going for a contract extension, given the potential changing and understanding the full scope of what was won. So what I just urge is that we really do make sure, given this is going to go into that procurement process already having been extended, that we make sure that is kept to time, so we don't end up in a situation in January 24 then asking for another extension because it wasn't done in a timely manner.
And that's very useful people I'm usually doing to keep this on track.
Thank you. In which case, can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 3, 2, 4? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. Anybody wish to take a couple of break at this point, or should we play on? Okay, I've just been told there is a problem with sound online. Are you still able to hear us?
Tap on the screen.
It looks like. Did it? Okay. Well, there's not a lot we can do about it. I need to bring somebody in online. We'll have to face that problem at that point. But for the moment, let's move on to item 13. Which is happy carriage maximum mayor tariff review. Liz, again.
Thanks very much, Leader. Yes, I think this is a very important report. Obviously, it's come as an urgent report, and the reasons for that are set out in the covering note. But I think that's mainly because the demand for the fair tariff review has come from the trade itself, and they are suffering a severe impact from the increases in fuel. And that's another aspect of the cost of living crisis that has been faced in the city by our citizens. It's having particularly significant impact on the taxi trade. So as a council, we control the maximum fares charged by hackney carriages. This is obviously enforced through the use of a meter for all journeys, which measures a combination of time and distance travelled. As you've seen in the reports and the appendices, the trade submitted 3 proposals for the maximum fares to be increased, which have not changed since 2012. Actually, it's really a surprise actually to think that we've had a whole 10-year period where the fares have not changed. And in fact, that I think it's actually the previous cabinet members and in our administration probably haven't had to deal with this issue, but it's now become urgent, and that's why we're taking this through as an urgent report. Officers have considered these 3 proposals, and we've taken the third one and amended it and put this forward as the preferred option, which you'll see as proposal 4. And I think the challenge has been to strike a balance between setting a fare that's acceptable and affordable for customers and to the drivers. Because obviously the drivers need to deal with the increase in fuel, but not price themselves out of the market for the travelling public. And obviously, you're seeing that the amended option 4 is largely based on a proposal by the RMT, which represents many of the drivers. So this report is seeking permission to start a consultation on the hackney carriage maximum fare tariff review, and the timetable would be, if you approve it, approval today, 26th of July, an advert in the Birmingham Mail will post no later than the 4th of August, which kicks off a 14-day statutory consultation. So that will be subject to print deadlines, and the consultation would end on the 19th of August. And after approval of the new tariffs and the expiry of the 14-day public notice period, all 680 hackney carriages will have to have their meters reset, recalibrated. So that means that the whole process will take between 6 to 8 weeks from approval of the Cabinet report today, allowing for recalling, and that's if there's no objection to the proposal. So the rest of the detail is set out in the report and the appendices. I've got the officers here, I think Paul and Sajila are both here to deal with any detailed queries, but I'd like to put all the recommendations in the report for approval. And I think this is urgent. We know that for Birmingham as an event city, the black cab trade is really important. There are all sorts of challenges during the pandemic. We also know that disabled people in particular rely on taxis to get around the city. So there's an important equalities aspect of this report. So I really would strongly recommend that we accept the recommendations and move forward with the consultation. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Liz. Can I also add my thanks to the officers who worked on this, because they've turned this report around very, very quickly indeed. And as you pointed out, Liz, the basis of the proposal that's now going to be consulted upon has come from one section of the black cab trade. We will now test that out through this consultation with the rest of the trade, and of course with users of black cabs, not least disabled people in the city who rely on black cabs to a large extent, so they can move around. Majid, I'll take your comment first.
Thank you. You largely said what I was going to say. I'd just like to thank the officers for the quick turnaround of this report. It's a request that's come from the trade, and I agree with Liz. It's been 12 years since there has been a fare increase. It's not often you'll see me supporting increase in any type of pricing for consumers, but in this instance, I do actually support the trade, and we are at risk. If you look at the numbers of licensed drivers and licensed vehicles, they've decreased drastically since the pandemic, so we do need to offer some support to the trade, and the hackney trade, as Liz has said, provides valuable service to the city. It's something that we can afford to lose, and the way the city council proposal is, it's like a foundation of all the different representations we've had from the drivers, the TOA itself, and RMT unions. So I think it's a fair proposal. If you look at the figures, it's still quite low in terms of we're only going to be above our neighbouring authorities, and we're still going to be below the likes of London, Watford, Oxford, Chatham, and Nottingham. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other comments then. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3? Thank you. Item 14 is Kings Heath and Ladywood Community Centres replacement for business case and contract award. This is a report going forward that was not on the forward plan. It is coming forward for a reason of urgency, and that is to do with the current rate of inflation in the country. If we delay the purchase of these boilers, we know we will end up paying more money for them in the future. So to avoid that, we're bringing this report through Cabinet today in order that we can obtain the best value that we possibly can as speedily as we can. So it's to seek approval to use corporate capital contingency budget resources, some £593,000 to replace the boiler systems at Langley and King's Heath Community Centre. Both sites have had the boiler fail, so they have no hot water or heating, and an emergency interim measure has been put in place for temporary boilers. And of course, the replacement of those temporary boilers with a new system will reduce the council's costs going forward. We will be replacing the boiler system with high energy efficiency models.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll be able to ask it in a way that means that doesn't touch on the private information, but I'll do my best to ensure that. I really just wanted to get some assurance that Cabinet is confident they've got the best price here. And the reason I say that is, many people have heard Councillor Simon Rowell talk about the experiences of similar issues at Hollymore Centre. So I'm just looking for assurance that the Cabinet is confident they've got the best value they're going to get here.
Well, I'm sure by officers that that is the case, but if you require some further assurance on that,
I'm happy for you to give your assurances.
Okay, that's fair enough. John?
Yeah, I had a similar question and going to make, because I understand that King's Heath Community Centre is not that large a building, and the sixth biggest sum for a boiler replacement system seems inordinate. And even if, it is urgent, clearly it needs to be done. But even if it's necessary for it to go through now, I just wonder whether there should be some kind of audit inquiry to investigate processes which have led to these rather high prices for boiler system replacement. The other question is who is ultimately bearing the cost of this? It's coming out of capital contingency. Will the community centres be required to contribute to the costs of it, which is a relevant factor in terms of the size of the costs?
Thank you. Well, first of all, this is more than just boilers, but you have to bear in mind these are not domestic boilers. These are boilers that for a community building, so they are obviously more expensive than purchasing a domestic boiler. But in addition to that, there's infrastructure that has to be replaced. I don't believe, John, that there is any cost being borne on centres themselves. Strategic Director of Council Management shaking her head, so that's not the case. What I will do though is I will go back to the officers to reassure myself for the second time that we are getting value for money in this purchase. Relative to the comments that you've both made. So with that, can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5? Agreed. Thank you. That brings me to appointments to outside bodies, of which there are two. First of all, Harbour Business Improvement District. The recommendation is to appoint Councillor Jane Francis from July this year to July next year. And the second one is the Alderson Disabled Ex-Servicemen's Home Trust. And the recommendation is to reappoint Connery Board. 2026, right.
Yeah, thank you. It's on the Harbour Business Improvement District, actually, just as a matter of tightness, it makes sense that it's the same system as all the other business improvement district ones are done at the first report that they may be giving you June each year rather than being just running a month late.
Yeah, I don't know why this slipped beyond that original cabinet report, because as you say, it could have been included. Let me just bring it to committee part.
I think it was missed from the.
Yeah, I think so. For next year, should we just bring it into that section?
Okay, are we happy to agree those two recommendations? Thank you. To plan procurement activities for August through to October of this year. Yvonne?
Thank you, Leader. And I must ask for forgiveness because I forgot to actually say this at the beginning of my last presentation, which was to thank the officers for their excellent work in terms of in recent years addressing the significant challenges that we've faced in Birmingham. And I know that there was even more challenges, so I just want to say thank you to your team, Deborah and Rebecca, for everything you've done so far. So this report, leader, sets out the details of the planned procurement activities for the period August 2022 to October 2022, which includes the extension of the contract for civil enforcement. Was it civil enforcement, Councillor? Civil enforcement. Civil enforcement. Thank you very much. I ask that we note the planned procurement activities under the Chief Officer delegation set out in the Constitution for the period August 2022 to October 2022 as detailed in Appendix 1.
Thank you. Any comments on Appendix 1?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously the idea of this purpose, these reports is to enable people to flag if they think something would benefit from a full report. So that's what I'm liking to do on this occasion. So the dynamic purchasing system provision of temporary accommodation, given that and given the context of what's on the extent report without mentioning what's on it, I think that ought to be subject to a full report to come to the cabinet. So I've made that request.
So the dynamic purchasing for this under temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
So this is a report from Bill Pittman, leader, Housing Transformation Programme Director, and Councillor Alden is requesting that we have a full report on this.
Then that is what we'll do. Okay, so with that duly noted, can we agree then recommendation 2-1? Thank you. Other business, does anybody have any? Well, in which case then, I will see you all at the arrival of the Queen's Baton into Victoria Square on Wednesday. And I look forward to enjoying that celebration with all of you. Liz.
Can I just remind anybody who hasn't yet voted, can you please all vote for Birmingham to be their headquarters of Great British Rail? Please, the heart of the rail network is heart of the country, so let's just get voting.
Shameless self-promotion.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in some more shameless information.
Next one.
While we've been sat here this morning, I received an email to say that our application to the residents help forward has been approved. So that'll be happening next year, 23. So
In the autumn.
To build on, get a couple of games out of the way, build on the cultural legacy and work with our partners across the region.
That is significant good news, and opportunity, as you've just said, for us to present the cultural art of this city on a platform that involves all of the major cities of Europe. So, congratulations.
Really brilliant.
Thank you. Just picking up this point actually, because it saves me emailing you later. I was going to suggest perhaps it might be worth the three political group leaders doing an open letter to Birmingham Mail asking residents to actually vote in that, just to try and encourage as many people in the city to vote as possible.
It's a healthy competition in Derby.
That's a very helpful suggestion. Thank you. We'll take that up. Okay, thank you all very much, and see you tomorrow evening.
Thank you.
An application to host Euro.
It's all, don't.
British Christ, yeah.